Hey guys, it's Lucian, and today I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of August. I know this video is pretty late, but I wanted to post my bookshelf tour before I posted my August wrap-up, and then I started school again, so everything kind of just got away from me. But I'm finally going to talk about it now. I read 20 books in August, so we have a lot to get through, so let's just get started. So the first book that I read in the month of August was The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This was actually a reread for me. This was the first ever Grishaverse book that I ever read. I read it in 2018, and I kind of just felt like rereading it again, but this is basically just a compilation of different fairy tales or folk tales set in the Grishaverse, and it was pitched as tales that the main characters of her books would have heard before bed. So I really enjoyed this book. I was kind of just in the mood for some creepy fairy tales, and I also just loved the way this book is organized. Every time you flip a page, there are 6 different stories, and when you start, it will look, like this, there's a little illustration, and then as you continue, the illustration will grow, and then after the story, there is a full page spread. And I really enjoyed that, and I just liked being back into these stories. I forgot a lot about them since I first read this book, and I really enjoyed getting back into them. And I really love the way that Leigh Bardugo writes these stories, and I think her writing style definitely really fits with this kind of vibe, and so I definitely really enjoyed it. I'm not sure, at this point I can't really remember exactly what each story was about, but I do remember really enjoying The Soldier Prince and The Witch of Duva. I think those were my 2 favorite stories, and I would definitely recommend this book if you kind of just want some fairy tales. And you also do not have to read any other Grishaverse book to read these. It's kind of a standalone. And also a lot of the stories in here are retellings of fairy tales from our world, so it's really fun, and I definitely really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I was still in a Leigh Bardugo mood, so I read Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo, which was the last book from her that I had to read. Now I have read every single one of her books, but this book is obviously about Wonder Woman, and it follows her when she is still on, her island, which is called the Themyscira, I think. I actually don't know how it's pronounced, but she ends up meeting a girl named Ahdieh, who is a Warbringer, which is pretty self-explanatory. They are these people that are descended from Helen of Troy, who bring war upon the world. So, Helen started the Trojan War, and there was, someone who started the War of the Roses, or, the 12 Years' War, I think it was called. And so, Diana basically has to, find a way with Ahdieh to stop this, inevitable war from starting. So I really enjoyed this book. I had kind of been putting it off for a while because I was who cares? And then I read it and I was I care. So I definitely really enjoyed this book. I thought it was fun. I do think it was very dialogue heavy, and it was kind of a lot to get through. And this book is, set in a contemporary world. We do leave the Themyscira, and we actually go to New York City and kind of all throughout the world. And so it is set in modern day, and it was just I felt Leigh Bardugo couldn't really shake off her fantasy writing style, because there were a lot of descriptions, and it was really there was so much dialogue to the point where I felt it was bogging down the story and making it way longer than it needed to be. And also, this is kind of a personal preference, but I really disliked the way that Diana acted in the modern world. She's this 6-foot-tall Amazonian woman on the subway, and it just felt very weird. It was a bull in a china shop. It was just out of place, and I just didn't like it really. And so that was kind of a weird personal thing that kind of was just I don't understand. But for the most part, I did enjoy this book. I thought it was fun, and I definitely really liked the Greek mythology aspect of the story. It actually reminded me a lot of Lore by Alexandra Bracken, because most of this book, or part of this book, is set in New York City, and it has to do with Greek mythology, and so I was definitely getting a lot of those vibes, so I really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I thought it was fun, and I would definitely recommend it if you want a fun kind of rompy road trip book that also incorporates a little bit of Greek mythology. After that, I picked up People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is the author of Beach Read, which was like a huge book that came out last year, and everyone was obsessing over it and raving about it. And this is her like sophomore romance novel, and I enjoyed Beach Read. I didn't like it as much as everyone else, and I'm sad to report that I had that same experience with People We Meet on Vacation. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. This is basically about Poppy and Alex, who are best friends, and every year they go on a summer trip together, until one year there's this big like cataclysmic event and they stop doing it. But now they end up deciding to go on like another trip and try and reconcile their relationship. So this book to me was just very boring. I feel like it was just very dry and bland, and it's very long for a romance book. I think this is like 360 something pages, and I just felt like there was nothing for me to grasp onto. I didn't particularly like Poppy or Alex. I thought they were both pretty just like boring characters. And also, when I read a book about vacation or summer, I want to read a book about vacation and summer. But like most of the trips that they went on in this book, because it does do flashbacks to like their previous summer trips, were so boring. It was like going to Ohio or like Tennessee, and like who cares? Like I live in the US. I can easily just like drive to Ohio or go to Tennessee. But what I don't get to do is go to like the Bahamas or Malta or the Maldives or, you know, the Philippines or something. Like I wanted something that was like very escapist and fun, and something that was like the Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I just wanted something that was a lot more fun and beachy, and this was just not. Like, it felt very boring. Like, they went to Palm Springs, and it was just like, okay, like, I just didn't care enough. And also, like, even the last couple of trips that they went on to, like, Italy and Croatia were more focused on their relationship drama, which I just did not particularly care about. And there were parts of this book that I did like. Like, I think the writing was good. I enjoy Emily Henry's writing, but like, and I did like some character moments, but for the most part, this was just very boring to me, and it was kind of like a slog to get through. So I was just not the biggest fan of this, and I know a lot of people really like it, so, I mean, to each his own, but I was just not the biggest fan. After that, I read an arc of Along the Saltwise Sea by A. Deborah Baker. This is the sequel to Over the Woodward Wall, which I read last summer and enjoyed. I thought it was like a fun children's-ish book that was like a cool adventure, and I was excited to get an arc of this book as well. But I am sad to report that I did not enjoy this book as much as the first one. I felt like this book was just very boring, and there was just not a lot for me to like care about. I think that the way this book is written, it is like it is so at arm's length, and I feel like I am reading the book and the characters and the story is just like a mile away. And I felt like the author kind of just like would have random stuff happen and be like, oh, but it's whimsical, so I can do it. Or there would be zero explanations for some things that were going on, and it just felt like the author was like, deal with it. Like, it was just so weird, and I was not a fan of that. And I also think that the two main characters were very dry. Like, I still don't know who they are and what their personalities are, and some of the people that they were with also, I just feel like were not fun and like cool to read about. And I also am not the biggest fan of like pirate books or books set on the ocean, and I thought this would be more interesting, but it really just wasn't, and so I didn't really like it that much. I do think the writing was like good, like apart from the weird like thing where I felt like I was at such a distance with the characters. I do think that the prose is very good, and I think it is fun to read. But I feel like this is just pretty okay for me, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This follows a girl named Avery who finds out that she is the heiress to a billion-dollar fortune, whose proprietor is a man she has never met before and had no idea existed. And she is thrust into this rich world. She is taken to his estate, which is called Hawthorne House, and the only way that she can collect her inheritance is if she stays in that house for a year with his entire family, whom he has just disinherited. And so she is basically going through this house, which is full of riddles and puzzles, and trying to figure out why this man who she has no idea about chose her to inherit, like, his billion-dollar fortune. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it, like, a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really loved how fun it was, and the chapters were really short and quick, and the pacing was, like, amazing, and I loved it. And I just loved all the puzzles and riddles, and it really reminded me of Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, which, as I'm sure most of you know, is like one of my favorite series of all time. And I just loved that aspect of the story, and I also really thought this reminded me a lot of The Westing Game, which is one of my favorite books that I had to read for school. I thought it was just so fun, and I loved how it was like all these rich people who were just disinherited and like salty about it, and this girl who was like very plain and ordinary who inherited all this money. And it was just really, really fun to read about, and I loved this house. It had all these secret passageways and layers, and it was really, really fun. And I definitely really enjoyed this book. If you have not read it, what are you doing? It's so fun. If you just need like a pick-me-up book that you can kind of shut your brain off while you read, I would definitely recommend this. It was so much fun. After that, I read American Royals by Katharine McGee. This is an alternate history book where instead of becoming our first president, George Washington became our first king. And so now in modern day, the House of Washington is still on the throne, and we follow four main characters in this book. The first is Beatrice, who is the heir to the throne, and she is set to become the first Queen of America. And she is also being tasked by her parents to find someone to marry. The second perspective is Samantha, who is Beatrice's sister, and she is the spare, you know, like the heir and the spare. She's basically there in case like a horrible casualty happens to Beatrice, and she will inherit the throne. Then we have Daphne, who was kind of involved in the royal family because she is the ex-girlfriend to Jefferson, who is Beatrice and Samantha's brother. He's Samantha's twin brother. And there is also Nina, who is Jefferson's current girlfriend and also Samantha's best friend. Oh, and also Samantha is falling in love with the guy that Beatrice is set to marry, and Beatrice is falling in love with her bodyguard. So it's this whole like tangled web of drama, and it's basically like The Crown meets like a soap opera. And I really actually enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was just so fun to read, and it was just like so much family drama and all these secrets being uncovered, and it was just like all these overlapping issues, and it was really, really fun to read. I do think that it was very long. This book is like 450 pages. It did not need to be that long, and I do think that there were scenes that dragged on a lot. And it could have been better, like, it could have been soapier and frothier. It could have just been more, like, there could have been more drama. There could have been more scheming and stakes and betrayals. And I just wanted a lot more fun from this book. It was still really fun, but I just wanted a little bit more. I also think this book would have been way stronger if we had gotten Jefferson's perspective, because as I said, we had four main characters, Beatrice, Samantha, Daphne, and Nina, and they all narrate the story. And I felt like a lot of the time I would get them confused because they do have like pretty similar personalities, and like the Katharine McGee is not the best at like characterization and like differentiating between like narrative voice for the different characters. And I think having like Jefferson's male perspective would have kind of given the story another dimension and would have kind of balanced out the other four main characters. But for the most part, I thought this was definitely a really fun story, and I will definitely pick up the sequel, and I'm excited for more of the drama, especially since there was like a huge cliffhanger at the end of this book, and I'm excited to see how it leads into the sequel. Next, I read Instant Karma by Marissa Meyer. This is a contemporary novel, and it is Marissa Meyer's first contemporary novel. I have read and really enjoyed her previous books, which were all like fantasy, sci-fi novels. So this book is really hard to describe because there's so many things going on, but basically it follows a girl named Prudence who is very type A, and it starts at the end of her sophomore year in high school, and she and her lab partner Quint have been working on this project for a really long time, and they end up getting a horrible grade on it, and Prudence really wants a chance to redo it, but Quint says no because she basically took over and thought that he was not good enough to do the project and felt like she wasn't understanding why he was kind of being a little bit of a slacker. Then after that, after like a night out with her friends, Prudence ends up slipping on a spilled drink and hitting her head, and finds out that she has the ability to cast instant karma on people. So if they're doing a bad deed, she can like snap her fingers and something bad will happen to them. and she finds out that the only person that this doesn't work on is Quint himself, and she also ends up going to the sea animal rescue center in the town and finds out that Quint works there and that he is the son to the woman that runs it. And it's basically just this whole thing. That was probably a horrible explanation, but there's just a lot going on in this book, and just like, it's complicated. But I really actually enjoyed this book. I had heard a lot of like mixed reviews for the story, and I was really excited about it when it first came out, but then it came out in November, and I was like, I'm not going to read a summary contemporary book in November when it's like cold out and snowing, and so I put it off, and I ended up hearing like not great things about it. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun book, and I definitely liked that there were like so many things happening, because it was very, you know, like life. Like, there's always a million things happening, and you always are thinking about like 90,000 different things. And so I definitely enjoyed that, and I liked Prudence as a character. She's not a good person, but I like reading about a person who sucks and then watching them kind of grow. And I definitely enjoyed that, and I liked reading about the animals because they were very cute, and it was just fun to read about. And I also really liked the kind of progression of the plot with the karma and stuff. I will say it's not really that big of a plot point, and I don't really know why it was like a huge part of the synopsis, and it's literally the title. But, you know, it was good. And I liked this book. I thought it was a fun, like, contemporary novel, and I would recommend it. Then I read Clean Getaway by Nick Stone. This is a middle grade book which follows a boy who ends up going on a like road trip with his grandmother to the different parts of the United States that was like in this in the green book. And I really did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I thought it was so boring. I really didn't like the writing. I felt like the author was like talking down to the reader, and I just did not enjoy that. I liked some of the messages and the themes in this book, but that's not enough. Like, diversity should be a standard, not a bonus, and I feel like just having good messages is not enough to save, like, a weak book. Like, one thing cannot save a sinking ship. You know what I mean? So I just did not like that. And I just felt like this book was, it almost felt like it was, like, phoned in. You know, like, even the chapter titles, like, all of the chapter titles are, like, the last word or last couple words of each chapter. And I was like, this is just so lazy. And so I did not enjoy that. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I wouldn't really recommend it. I think there are way better books that explore these same topics, so. Then I reread The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I'm not going to talk about this book at all because I've literally talked about it in, like, a million different videos. But I reread this book because I just wanted to, and I thought it would be, like, a fun summary read. And it was, so yeah, 5 stars. Then I read My Favorite Half-Night Stand by Christina Lauren. This is a romance book that follows 2 main characters. So we have Millie and Reed, who are friends, and they are in a friend group that are all like professors at this one university. And one night they end up sleeping together, and they kind of have to deal with the fallout of that, and then their friend group is going to like this black tie event, and they all need friends, and they end up going on this dating website, and Millie creates 2 profiles, one that's her actual self, and one that is a catfished version of herself, with her middle name and a blurry picture that you can't tell is her. And she ends up matching with Reed, who is the guy that she slept with, and is also her friend, but he doesn't know that it's her. I did not enjoy this book. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I really did not like how catfishy this book was. I know that it's in the synopsis, but it just went on for way too long. The charade, like, never ended. It was just, like, so much. And I didn't really care for the characters. It felt really weird that I was reading about 30-year-olds that, like, didn't know how to use technology, and it felt really just, like, ridiculous. And I was not the biggest fan of that. There were some scenes that I liked and some things that I enjoyed, but they were very few and far between, so not really my favorite. It's probably my least favorite Christina Lauren book, so yeah. Then I read Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I'm not even gonna attempt to talk about this book, like give a synopsis, because it is so complex. There are like 10 different main characters, and they all have their own thing going on, and it also switches between like the past and the present, and it's this whole thing. So basically all you need to know is that there's like a bank robber, and we follow all the people that are like there during the heist, and some other people as well that are connected to those people that were there. And it's this whole thing. I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was very confusing at times because as I said, there are like 10 different perspectives, and it also switches between like timeline. So like it's not linear, and it was kind of a jumbled mess at times. And I definitely liked the writing. I thought that was probably its strongest point. But for the most part, it was just very like, I definitely enjoyed it, and I liked the kind of plot and how it was very character driven, and it was almost like a character study into all of these different people and how they're connected, and I liked the themes that ran through the story and connected everything, and it was like woven through, and kind of like, it was like, there were different people that were like dealing with the same thing, and then there was like a whole other character stuff, and then there was like a theme and a message within. I'm not a candy sense. But I enjoyed this book. It's kind of really difficult to talk about because there's like so many things happening at once. So I would say just read it. I think it is worth the read because it does have a lot of things to say about like anxiety and, you know, social stuff and dealing with people, and I liked it and I thought it was fun, and I would definitely recommend it. It's kind of like thinly veiled self-help. Like, it's very much like a self-help book. So if you're willing to go through that, I think you will enjoy this book. After that, I read an arc of Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Anthony Doerr is the author of All the Light We Cannot See, which I read last year and really enjoyed. And this book is also very difficult to explain because there's like 3 different periods of time and settings and also different characters within that. But the first one we are in Constantinople during the siege. We follow one character who is like inside the walls of Constantinople, dealing with like these people who embroider robes for priests, and then we have Omir, who is part of the people that is like advancing towards Constantinople to sack, you know, the city. And then in like present day, we follow 2 characters. One is like the head librarian to this library, and the other one is like some random kid. Then we go in the future, and there's a girl named Constance who is, like, on a ship heading towards an exoplanet. So, it's kind of confusing, and they all end up interacting with this book called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is about this guy who wears wings and ends up going to this city in the clouds. So, this book was very odd. I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I honestly didn't really like it. I thought it was so confusing for literally no reason. Like, I feel like it would have been way better if the story was actually linear, and if it was, like, not, like, how it is. Like, I feel like each of the stories, like, the one in Constantinople, the one in present day, and the one in the future, could have all been, like, their own book. You know, I feel like this almost could have been, like, a trilogy, and you could have the book that, like, the Cloud Cuckoo Land book, which is, like, woven throughout. But also, I think that was such a weak, like, connection for each of the different time periods, and it was just not good. Like, this book was just not really that good. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was very confusing, and I didn't really like any of the characters, because you also have those characters, but then it will, like, do flashbacks. And it was just weird. I was not a fan. The more I think about it, the more I dislike this book. So it's like a 2.75. I didn't really like it. Next, I read another arc, this time for The Righteous by Renée Ahdieh, which is the 3rd book in the Beautiful series. I can't really talk about this book because it's the 3rd book in a series, and also if I told you what the 1st book is about, it would mean nothing to you, because book 3 has, like, we have deviated so far from the original premise to the point where it just wouldn't. Like, me telling you the plot of the 1st book would give you no insight into what this 3rd book is about, and I don't want to really spoil it for people who haven't read the first 2 books. But, I enjoyed this book. I liked the 2 main characters that we follow. Basically, each book in the Beautiful series focuses on a different character's perspective, like, mainly. And this one follows the friend to the main character of the 1st book, and also, like, another person who is, like, a part of this Court of Lions, which is, an important group of people in the first 2 books, and I liked that. I liked their kind of romance that was starting to happen, and I also liked, we get a lot into the Fae worlds in this book, and I enjoyed that, and I liked reading about the politics of the Fae world, but I feel like this book was just very slow. Not a ton happened, and I felt like there was no really overarching plot. It was kind of just, you're with the characters, and there's, like, not much else to it. And you do get a little bit more insight into other characters like Celine and Bastion and like Michael too, and like a lot of different people, and I enjoyed that aspect. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so I definitely enjoyed it. I really, really liked the beginning, and I actually read this book in the whole day. I thought it was so quick to get through and so fun to read. But once I like took a step back, I was like, nothing happened in this book, and I don't really understand it. But I am being kind of negative, but I did enjoy it. I thought it was fun. But I am much more excited for the 4th book in the series, because the way that this book ended led into what I think is going to happen in the 4th and final book really well, and Renée Ahdieh said that in book 4 we return to New Orleans, and it's kind of like the final showdown. So I'm really excited for that, and it also is set during Halloween, so I'm really interested in that. But I liked this book. I thought it was a good, like, installment in the series, and I think if you liked the first 2 books, you will still like this book. But for me, personally, I'm just really, really excited for the finale to this series. After that, I picked up Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Tahlia Hibbert. This book follows Chloe Brown, who, after a near-death experience, ends up creating a list which will help her get a life, and the person that she is going to have help her with this is the handyman in her building, who she ends up, starting a romance with. It's a romance book. I'm horrible at describing romance books because you know what's going to happen. They're going to get together. So I definitely enjoyed this book. I thought it was fun, and I definitely enjoyed it more in the moment. Like, now that I'm looking back on it, I think I originally gave it like a 3.75. I'd probably give it like a 3.5 or a 3.25 now, but I definitely liked it. I really liked the cat in the book, and also the, like, little chapter breaks in this book are cats. I'm trying to find one. Ooh, here it is. Like, can you see that? Oh, I really liked it. And I liked the 2 main characters. I thought they had a good, like, chemistry, but, for the most part, I am kind of just pretty ambivalent about this book. I thought it was fun, and I did like some of the things that they did. It was kind of slow at points, and there were parts that I feel like could have been trimmed down a lot. And this book could have definitely been shorter, but I liked it. I thought it was a fun read, and I am interested in continuing on with the series. I do think that the, like, conflict in the last, like, 25% of the book was not really needed, and it was kind of just, like, something to, like, advance the plot, and I feel like it was just not good enough to do that. So yeah, but I still like this book, and I feel like if you want just like a fun, fluffy book that also has a little bit of seriousness, you should pick this up. Then I read The Rose Society by Marie Lu. This is the 2nd book in the Young Elites series. I read the Young Elites in November of last year, and I did really like it. And The Rose Society picks up where that book left off, and this series follows Adelina, who finds out that she is... Basically, there was this fever that swept through this world called the Blood Fever, which gave these people who survived strange markings and also strange abilities. And Adelina can create shadows and darkness and manipulate these illusions and stuff. And I really, really liked this book. I thought it was much better than book 1. I enjoyed book 1, but it wasn't anything special, really. But The Rose Society was really good, and I definitely really liked the sequel. I think it was so much better than the first book, and there was, like, parts that were a little bit slow, and I did feel like I also had to, like, reread some parts every now and again, but that could have totally been, like, a personal thing, not a book thing. And I really liked the way that the characters grew. I like Adelina a lot more now. I think it's so interesting to follow a story from the villain's perspective. And I really enjoyed that, and I also really like how this book, it is told through the first-person perspective of Adelina, but we also get, like, little chapters from, like, other characters, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the story, and I felt like it just added a lot more dimension, and even the new characters we met in this book that we didn't get perspectives from, I really liked, and I think added a lot to the story, and I would definitely recommend this series if you have not read it yet, and if you only liked book 1 but you weren't a big fan of it, definitely continue on because it gets way better. And then I picked up The Midnight Star by Marie Lu, which is the 3rd and final book in the Young Elites series, and I loved this book. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. It is one of the most perfect finales I've ever read. I loved the way that things picked up from the last book and led into this next book. There were so many scenes that, like, stick so far so much in my memory, and that I've, like, reread since I read this book, and I'm just obsessed with the story in this book. I feel like it was probably the strongest plot, and I definitely loved how we got more into, like, the gods of this world, and I think Rereads just expanded this world so much in this book, and I thought it was the perfect finale. It is one of the best endings to a series I've read in my entire life, and I loved it so much, and it was so good. This series has easily become one of my absolute favorites, and I cannot wait to reread it. Next, I read The Midnight Library by Haig. This book follows a woman named Nora who ends up taking her own life, and then ends up in this library where she gets to experience different versions of her life if she had done different things. I gave this book 2 stars. I thought it was so boring. Literally every life was so mundane and, like, bland. I thought it would be more like a fantasy book, and it was not. It felt like a Hallmark movie in a bad way, and I did not like it. I thought Nora was so boring. She was not even a person. She was like a blank canvas of a human, and she was not fun to read about. She was so boring, and I didn't like her, and this book was just so, it felt so long. It's like 300 pages, but it felt like a million. Like, I just did not like it whatsoever. And the themes of this book and the messages are so clearly laid out. Like, there's no nuance, there's no subtlety. It's like, just, it gives you what happens. It gives you what you're meant to take from it, and I did not like that, so yeah. I gave this 2 stars. Not a fan. Then after that, I read The Comfort Book by Haig, which is, like, basically just a bunch of quotes, and it's a motivational self-help book. I didn't rate this book because I don't really rate nonfiction books like this, but it was fine. There were some parts that I liked, but then there were some parts that were, like, very basic advice, so. And then I reread 2 books. I reread Furthermore and Whichwood by Tahereh Mafi. These are her 2 middle grade novels that are, like, fantasy books. I'm not really going to go into the plot of these because it's kind of difficult to explain. And also, I feel like you should probably just go in blind because I think it's really great to go in that way. Or maybe I'm just saying that because I'm lazy and I don't want to explain what they're about, but you know what? I think you would still enjoy it even if you know nothing about this series. But I really liked them. I thought they were super fun and whimsical, and I loved the nonsensical aspect of these books. And I really liked the Persian mythology that was kind of integrated into the story. And I think Tahereh Mafi's writing is just so amazing, and she really did like a fantastic job with this series, and I really hope she writes more of them. I think they're just so fun to read, and I am a huge fan. So, really enjoyed both of these, and I think I liked them even more on Rereads, so definitely pick them up if you haven't. But that is it for this very long video. My wrap-ups are always so long. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to know what books you read in August. If you want to know any more of my thoughts, I write Goodreads reviews for all the books that I read, so you can read those as well. My Goodreads is in the description box, so you can read that. And yeah, that's it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All my social media links are in the description box below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!